Today is day 2 of our dissection. We'll be looking at the external organs of the mink, and we're also going to do a review of directional terms. And so I'll be showing you those directional terms on the mink. And so let's get started. The first terms I want to talk about are cranial and caudal. And cranial just means that we're going towards the head. So that's cranial. And caudal means towards the tail. And so that's cranial and caudal. Next, we'll talk about dorsal and ventral. And dorsal refers to the backbone. And so you can't see the dorsal side on the mink. This actually is a mink that was done, I believe, last year. And so this is what they use to label all of their directional terms. So on here you can't see dorsal because dorsal means the backbone. But this belly area is what we call the ventral surface. And then dorsal would be the backbone. Whoops. So I'll just write that out for you. Dorsal is the backbone, and we can't see that on this picture. Next we'll look at lateral and medial. Medial means it's toward the midline. So if I put a midline, it's the organs that are close to the midline, so that's medial. And lateral would mean, let me just switch colors so it's easier for you guys to see. If I put the lines out here, those would be lateral, or we would refer to organs or structures that are closer to the outside of the body, and that's L-A-T-E-R-A-L. I know it doesn't look like that in my writing. And next we'll look at proximal and distal, and so I'm going to kind of box out the leg portion of the mink, and proximal would be parts that are closer to where it connects to the trunk of the body, so this would be proximal. And distal would refer to something that was further away from where that attachment is to the body or to the trunk. So that's proximal and distal. And next we're going to talk about the planes, ways that the body can be cut. So when we're looking at the mink and we're talking about a sagittal or a mid-sagittal, that simply means that I'm going to have a line. Mid-sagittal means exactly down the middle so that my right and left sides are symmetrical. You could also have a sagittal line that's maybe a little to the left or a little to the right, and we would just call that a sagittal plane. But mid-sagittal is going to just go down the middle. Okay, so I'm showing you mid-sagittal here. And maybe if I cut here or I cut here, not down the middle, that would be a sagittal plane. So that's the difference between those two terms. And next we have a transverse plane. Transverse plane is just going to cut and give you a top portion and a bottom portion. So a part that is going to contain the head and a part that is going to contain the tail portion of the mink. So we're just cutting the body, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in half. It can be further up or further down on the mink. I have it sort of in the middle, and that would be a transverse plane. So just cutting so you have a head portion and a tail portion. And the last is a frontal plane, which is I'm not going to be able to show you this on this slide just because the mink is laying on its back, and this mink is a boy, so I'm going to say he is laying on his back. Frontal plane just means you're going to cut so that you have a front portion or a ventral portion and a dorsal portion. So you're going to separate the ventral from the dorsal and have a plane that's going through the body in that way. And that's hard for me to show you on the mink the way that the mink is laying on the tray here. So the next thing I want to do is talk about some of the external regions of the mink. And I'm going to label them on the slide for you so that you know, if I say this particular region, you know what I'm talking about. So the first region is going to be this region right, whoops, I didn't mean to do that, is going to be this region right here, and this would be the head. The next region is going to go from the bottom of the head down to about here, and that's going to be the neck region. And then we have another region that I call the armpit region. So it's hard to see, but it's going to be that portion which would look like the armpit of the mink. That is called the axilla region. And then the next part we're going to look at is going to be the thorax. So that's going to go from the neck down to this area right here. So that's going to be the thorax. The thorax holds our lungs and our heart. And then the next area is going to be the abdomen. And that goes down to here. So we have the abdomen like so. So those are the portions of the mink. Now there's a couple other things that I'm going to label. We have a male mink here, and so we're going to label his male organ. And there's also the anal glands. They're kind of hard to see, so I'm going to kind of circle the area where they would be, but to the right or left of right and to left of the tail. So those would be the anal glands or anal sacs. And the other things that I want to mention would be the hind limbs and the forelimbs. So the forelimbs are right here. Forelimbs are also called manus. Manus is another word for hands. And we have our hind limbs, which are down here. It's all one word. And these are called pes, P-E-S. And so those would be like our feet if we were looking at a human. And so that is all the things that I would like you to have labeled, or at least know where things are arranged on the mink. So some of those external features that are important. So this slide I want to talk about two external organs. One is the eyes. So you can see the eyes. Oh, I did it again. Here we go. You can see the eyes right here, so I'm going to label those. And I'll talk a little bit about the eyes in a second. And then the other thing I want you to notice are the ears. These are called pinnae. And that's the external ear. Now remember I said when they skin the mink for pelting, they skin off that external portion of the ear. So we're really just seeing the ear, the opening to the ear canal. We're not really seeing the pinnae, but that's where it would be located. So that's the eyes and the ears. Now, most of the sensory organs are located on the head of the mink. Let's talk a little bit about the eyes. Mink are nocturnal, so their eyes do have a specialized reflective layer on the retina. It's called the tapetum lucidum. And what it does is it allows the maximum amount of visible light into the photoreceptor. So basically what that means is it can absorb the maximum amount of light and make it easier for the mink to be able to see at night, since it is nocturnal and it does most of its hunting at night. It also, that tapetum lucidum, gives the mink the yellow-green kind of shiny eyes at night. Cats have them as well, so if you have a cat and you see that kind of shiny look to their eyes at night, that's what's causing that. Also with the eyes, they do have upper and lower eyelids, but they also have a third eyelid, which is called the nictitating membrane. And the nictitating membrane is used, or it's used when they're swimming, because it will cover the eye and protect the eye when they're swimming underwater. So it covers it and protects. And it actually, the upper and lower eyelids move up and down, but the nictitating membrane moves laterally. So it's moving from left to right across the eye. So that's how the nictitating membrane works. The other thing that I want to talk about are the ears. And the ears are just another sensory organ, obviously, for them to be able to hear anything that might be trying to attack them. So it gives them a way to hear, just like our ears are used for hearing as well. And on this slide, we have a really good picture of the nares. So the nares are just the nostrils. And so we have a nice front view of the face there. Again, this was pictures that were submitted when another group did the actual dissection. And the nares, or the nostrils or nose, are used to sense chemicals that are dissolved in the air. So we have receptors in our nose that work to sense smell. And we talked a little bit about that. I know one class did this earlier, a couple months ago, where we smelled all the different organic chemicals. It was an organic smell lab. And we talked a little bit about that sense of smell. So you may remember how that sense of smell works. It would work the same way in a mink. The things that are missing on the mink in this picture are its whiskers. So if I were to draw in the whiskers, I'm going to use a color that's going to show up a little bit better. Whiskers would be on the cheeks, like so. Again, a sensory organ. They have sensory receptors so that when the whiskers touch things, it sends sensory information to the brain. Now, there also can be whiskers not only on the cheeks, but also above the eyes. So you could have some whiskers around the eyes as well. Again, you wouldn't see these whiskers because when the mink is skinned, the whiskers are taken off with the skin. You also could see some whiskers in the chin area as well. So they're all used for tactile sensation, and again, they have sensory structures in them that send information back to the brain. So those are all the external organs that you need to be aware of. The next video that you're going to see will be us opening up the mink and looking at the digestive organs. I don't have any videos to go along with the external organs because it's pretty easy to show things like that in pictures, but I will have some videos to go along with the opening of the mink and looking at some of those organs. So be prepared for some videos and also video lessons to go along with that. So the only requirement right now would be to just keep working on that journal. Hopefully you looked through the virtual dissection lab instructions and you've downloaded the journal. And as you're going through each video lesson, you can be adding answers to the journal questions and your thoughts about what you learned that day also in the journal. And please make sure that you're reading the lab reading. It helps you learn, and it also helps you answer the questions that are in your journal that you're keeping for this part of class. So that's all for today, guys. Nice short lesson for you. Next lesson will be the digestive system, and we'll open up the mink.